Hello everyone, it's a very rare solo video from me today, and today I'm going to take you through a little detailed look at the deck I recently played at the Content Creator Set Champs in London. Group of 32 players from across Europe was selected to play in a little preview set championship tournament, and I was able to win and secure myself this very pretty Maleficent mat, which is obviously lovely, and you should all go out and try to win yourself one over the coming weeks. But I wanted to set some time aside, outside of the podcast, outside of the regular stuff, to just do a solo video where I can kind of give you some deeper and more detailed thoughts about the deck and some of the thought patterns behind it and why I played it, why I think it's good, why you might want to play it, why you might not want to play it. And some of the decisions that go into, I think, playing it well. So, like I say, yeah, very very rare for me these days to have to speak without my emotional support German at my side. But let's give it a go, and hopefully you find this useful. So, by now you probably would have seen the list that you see here. The video isn't going to change a lot. It's mostly an audio experience. I'm just going to talk you through the deck. You've probably seen it on Twitter. I tweeted it about a week ago, but there was an embargo on talking about the Creator Champs, so I am only now able to talk about it enough to sort of tell you that I won and actually put some data behind the deck list and say, yeah, I won all my matches apart from one. Oh, sorry, apart from one I lost in Swiss and plus an ID, and won them all on the draw. So I didn't win a single dice roll and was able to bring home the tournament win, which I'm really proud of. Like I say, not the biggest field tournament in the world at 32 players, but had to go through multiple continental invited competitors. It was a strong field of people that know the game well. So nonetheless, feeling proud about that performance and just really happy with the showing that the deck put up on the day. So felt amazing, as you might expect, to be able to win with something that's largely of my own creation, and yeah, just a really really good feeling in a metagame that I wasn't having a lot of fun with, to find a way through that felt very very exciting and a bit different and taking people by surprise. So yeah, those that listen to the podcast a lot probably know that that's kind of the way I like to do things, and when it comes together it feels great, because as a strategy it can fall flat pretty often. It's a bit of a swing for the fences kind of play. So it felt amazing, yeah, really really happy all in all. So yeah, let's maybe start with some chat on Origins. Right back at the start of Fabled season, still during spoiler season really, Max Goof, the 3-cost one, was one of the first cards I started experimenting with. There were some early builds that kind of focused around discard, and the amount of playable discard effects in the format went down so much that I was thinking, right, what if we're sudden chilling? We can buy back sudden chills with Max, play chips. Is there a chance to kind of play this, try and port the green steel strategies of the past into post-rotation format? And the short version of the results for that was just they were pretty weak. Overall, trying to discard people is really hard at the moment. The power of the card draw that's out there is a lot greater than the sort of ability to discard that you have with the current tools we have available. And a lot of the best decks are kind of built to top deck really effectively. So discarding Blurple a lot of the time doesn't feel amazing, because if they've inked up to 6 or 7, who cares what they draw? They have like 8 misses, and everything other than that is super live. So not a fantastic strategy, which meant that it was something I put down quite quickly. I didn't really keep going with it. It was shelved to make room for other experiments, and I moved off it and moved on to Purple Steel, which I played for a ton of time until it stopped being fun. And then one day I've told the story to a few people, and it sounds like I'm making it up, but I promise you I'm not. I took a couple of days break from testing just to cool off for a bit, and one night on those nights I had a dream that was basically just like, I don't remember the specific dream, but the vague feeling that I woke up with was, it's time to go back to Max Goof, and I need to try and get it into like a PS style steel tempo shell. Just something that goes 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, strength, Max Goof, strength again. Let's port that into build that as a green steel deck, start from there and see what we can make happen. Clarabelle was the Clarabelle package was an obvious consideration from the start. Super powerful at the moment, and kind of green-blue is really showing its strength. I think that on the play, Clarabelle is among the most powerful things you can do in the game. So it felt like it made sense to kind of marry those strategies up, see how you might be able to connect them into just a very fair but efficient tempo style steel deck. Once the theory crafting for the deck started in earnest, one of the big reasons to play green steel was that you don't have access to just strength as your 3-cost song like purple steel does. You have access to Mother Knows Best as well, which is a massive pet card of mine and always has been. I think it's a card that some people hate, and I can understand why they really dislike it. It's a card I really, really like. I think it's like the perfect example of something that's incredibly powerful when it's good. Comes at the cost of being slightly bricky sometimes, but also affords you these really, really good opportunities to just like find a way to do something cool with it, whether it's just a direct bounce something big that your opponent has. That's like the obvious written on use case, but doing things like singing it with you could sometimes just like sing it with a Pete to return that Pete when you have only 3 ink available and you need to repeat. So you can use it as a little bounce repeat tool. You can use it for bouncing your docks, and there's a ton of stuff in this deck that you're happy to bounce back and just do these value Mother Knows Bests with, to replay these things. Whether it's getting more card draw, bouncing a go-go, like I say, applying pressure with Pete. All these things are viable options as sort of alternative things to do with your Mother Knows Best. So the toolbox as a whole started to come together. And when the sort of testing began in earnest, I really felt the power of these things in conjunction with one another. Lots and lots of little synergies that were going on, and when the plan came together. So you have these proactive plans where when going first, it's so much easier to pull off this turn 5 Clarabelle shift, and when you shift Clarabelle, Mother Knows Best is obviously crazy, and then you're fueling up again massively. You're almost always drawing into your next bounce effects, your maxes, to do the same thing again, and you can just start getting these loops going where you do similar things each turn, maintain massive control of the board, and your opponents can't really do a whole lot about it. They just sort of get stuck under a Clarabelle, stuck under a max, and you just keep them on the back foot forever. At the same time, like sometimes the engine isn't firing on all cylinders and you're doing just a much more fair curve out, at which point, like if you ever get off a shift max, you can just do things in the late game like quest with your max to rebuy Mother Knows Best, to bounce your dock, to get the draw engine going again, and all these nice little bits of synergy, and the cards just generally play very nicely together. And what you're looking at really is not an exceptionally linearly powerful deck in any way. It just ticks over very, very nicely, to use like a very British term. It just plays nice and smoothly. You have access to a ton of disruptive tools in Pete and Ursula, which kind of takes me on to the next part of the origins of the deck and the thought behind it. It felt extremely well positioned into the movements that were happening in the metagame at the moment I came up with it, which was about 2 weeks ago. So at that moment in time, we were facing this environment where Blurple was massively played. There was an absolute ton of Blurple around, and people were pretty uniformly considering it the best deck. Purple Steel was starting to tick down because its Blurple matchup was getting worse, and as a result, you then had 2 decks that began rising in the shadow of Blurple, which were Green Blue and Amber Steel Aggro. So Amber Steel Aggro was piloted to the first CCQ victory in the US by Sky, an amazing run with an incredibly powerful build that sort of fully showcased what Amber Steel can do this set, and I think built a lot of steam behind the deck and made people think, you know what, this is a really viable strategy. This isn't just like a gimmicky aggro deck, has real legs, has a massive skill ceiling. So that deck was rising. It's one of the things on my mind. And the other deck that was rising was Green Blue. So again, piloted to some great results. People putting up a lot of great content about the deck and showing what that's capable of. And as the pieces came together for this deck, it just felt like it had the chance to craft a great matchup into both of those decks at the same time. So Green Blue, obviously looking to under the sea people, looking to put big things, just like plays just like a ton of big stuff and under the seas you. So Mother Knows Best, a very efficient tool against a lot of these big things like Scrooge and that sort of thing. Even against shifted Clarabelles, you're happy to bounce them back and start trying to establish your own, so you can get back to card parity and create a situation where their board is empty and you can begin going wide. And then Pete and Ursula, incredibly disruptive to their removal plan, to all of their song-based plan, ends up coming together as a really nice. You have a really nice set of tools against that deck. So. Yeah, that's not a complete guide on how to beat green blue, but you have the resources available specifically to disrupt them, maintain a nice clear board while you go wide. And against Amber Steel, the big card on my mind was Lewis. Lewis was something that was tested really heavily at the start of the set. It was something that was theorized to be the de facto sort of Fox replacement. It was going to be one of these 3-drops that was going to really help you catch up against aggro when you were on the back foot, and it was going to shut everything down and start hitting for 4 and clean all these Tianas up and everything. And what actually happened was these Amber Steel decks put Captain Hook and Calhoun in their deck, both of which trade up really profitably into Lewis. So you sort of were like, right, who cares if my Tiana has Reckless? She just won't quest this turn. I'll trade up my Hook into your Lewis, and that's an incredible deal for the Amber Steel player. So what changed was that the Amber Steel players shifted to make their deck more aggressive, moved away from Hooks and Calhouns, completely cut both of them in some cases, to make their deck faster, to make it the most potent aggro deck it could be, which opened the door back up for Lewis. And Lewis went from being unplayable to being just about the best card in the deck against them, and a sort of hard shutdown. So with this being like a Captain Hook, Calhoun, Lewis deck into an Amber Steel aggro deck that specifically had engineered itself to become soft to Lewis again, I felt like I had a really, really solid game plan against them. Against Purple Steel, you're playing such a similar plan to them. You're just 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, sing removal, play something else. At the time, many of them were off Pete. That's now changed, I think, because people have sort of demonstrated the power of Pete again. They're now doing that. But the idea against them was that if we were on the draw, we can play Pete as our 3-drop. We can make sure we get the first strength off. And once we get the first strength off, we can then use Max to make sure we get another strength off. Following that, we can snowball that out and we can start to just maintain control of that game. So it's a massively dice roll dependent deck. I certainly don't feel like it crushes me, but it's not one of the best ones. It's dice roll dependent. You want to get the first strength off. Pete helps you do that. And Ursula can help you make sure that in a pinch, if you don't have a Pete, you can try and stop them from playing their removal. But you will need strengths for genies, basically. You'll need to be able to clean up genies, which is an important part of that matchup. All of this to say that it generally had a very, very good matchup spread. The problem deck really was Blurple. Blurple on the draw specifically, it's a very, very challenging matchup because regardless of what you did, if you were on the draw, you were always getting your 3-drop Elsard on their 5-ink turn, which is their turn 4. And that's really, really rough to recover from. Their standard play pattern of 1-drop, ramp, Genie, Elsa, Bell, close to unbeatable with the deck. So I felt like there was something here. There was the proof of concept was good. I had strong win rates in testing with it, with the exception of on the draw games against Blurple, and it was a hedged bet for the weekend based on, right, I don't think too many people will be playing Blurple because I think there are other decks rising to beat it. I think those decks will be more popular, and I think that in general I'm going to have to beat a ton of aggro. I'm likely going to have to beat some Purple Steel. I might have to beat 1 or 2 Blurples, which I can do, especially if I'm given an opportunity to go first. It's just tough, and you need them to miss on a couple of things. So I thought, on balance, looking at the expected metagame distribution for the weekend, I can take that, because most things have one soft matchup. I can deal with it and hope for decent matchups. And that kind of did come to pass. I did lose to Blurple once in the Swiss. I played it again in the top 8 and was able to win 2-1 on the draw. So sometimes the conditions come together. It's not like you're completely dead in the water. But I would say a word of warning if you're considering playing this. The Blurple matchup would certainly be one of the biggest reasons to not play it. And heading into the Bologna DLC, and we've got a CCQ weekend this weekend. It's really tough to advocate strongly for something that I don't think has the best Blurple matchup, because at the time of crafting the deck, all forces pointed towards a reduction in meta share for Blurple. I would quite honestly predict an uptick now looking at it. I think the deck is remarkably consistent, easy to pilot compared to some of the things out there. The floor on it is high. It's only so bad it can be. Outside of the failure mode of missing ramp, which happens sometimes, I think it's incredibly good. So I would put it, maybe it could start knocking on 40% meta representation. I certainly wouldn't be shocked to see that come DLC time. But in terms of a overall good matchup spread across the number of decks, I was very, very happy with the performance of this. So it sounds a little bit like I'm down on the deck, which I'm not at all, because I think I had such a good time playing it, and it felt very, very similar to tempo decks of the past, and certainly the closest thing to a true tempo deck that I'd played this set. That I think I would still play it in a lot of conditions. If I was playing a CCQ this weekend, which I unfortunately can't, if I was playing that, I would probably play something like this with potentially a few small changes, but nothing major. I think, in general, what you have here is something with polarized matchups. It's very, very good against aggro. It can be exceptionally good against green-blue. It takes even matchups with purple steel, and your cost for that is a rougher on the draw Blurple matchup. So for some rooms, specifically for some set champs, this could be an incredibly strong meta choice. But what you're looking at primarily isn't a meta breaking deck, but it is an anti-meta tool. So if your read on the room is heavy aggro, so lots of amber steel, some churned Chromicon dogs, or under the sea dogs, and a fair amount of green blue alongside that, it could be an incredibly good surprise pick, because you can make very good favoured matchups out of those matchups. So that was what was going on behind the scenes and in my head, just thinking, within these colours, we do have access to this ability to just constantly go 1 drop, 2 drop, 3 drops, sing a disruptive song, rebuy a song on turn 4, sing it again, shift a Clarabelle, draw a bunch. Very good adaptive play patterns that like you want from any kind of solid tempo deck. You can go quite fast, you have good reach in the form of Go-Go, you have some great late game draw engines and loops with Max Goof, Mother Knows Best, Doc. Incredibly versatile deck, and actually pretty deep if you play it a bit. I would imagine that a lot of people who have picked this up and tested it, the first few games going to feel quite clunky. Certainly not something that pilots itself. There are sequences of cards you can play that leave you dead versus sequences of cards you can play which feel close to unbeatable. So something to get your head around for sure, and something to spend a decent bit of time with. If you actually want to, push it to its limit. So I think for some players like me that love this tempo play style, and specifically people that love to play with Mother Knows Best, this is going to feel very familiar. If you played any of those green-purple decks in the past that also played Clarabelle Shiftline, this is going to feel very familiar. It's a really similar set of play patterns, and you just do much the same as you always did. You continue to develop threats, working towards shifting a Clarabelle as early as you can. You bounce the big stuff. You strength what you can when you can. And just work towards making sure you're constantly drawing more cards than your opponent while presenting more threats to them. It's a remarkably simple strategy when you boil it down like that. But within that, you have this fantastic set of varied tools that help improve all these different matchups at the same time, while mostly, uniformly, it's not like they're silver bullets, you know? Like a card like Calhoun is incredible against aggro, but you couldn't consider it a silver bullet. It's a versatile card that you're almost always happy to run out on turn 2 most of the time for its ability to either freeze boards when you're behind or just comfortably push some slow questing when you're ahead. So all of them are pretty adaptive cards that do different things at different points in the game too, which makes the deck feel even more toolboxy and even more, I guess, just versatile overall. So regarding matchups and moving ahead, I think I would really love to advocate strongly for the deck because I do think it's a ton of fun, and it's certainly like something that could contest for tier 2. It's a deck that a lot of people didn't see or think about, and I think there is something very, very playable here. But exercise caution if you feel like you're going to play against a ton of Blurple is the only thing I'd warn you on. If you do feel like you're stepping into a room full of aggro and green blue, it's very much something to consider and worth exploring yourself, giving it some testing, because I think it's another one of those things that can look very medium on paper, but when it plays and when you see that, start to feel some of the interactions between these cards and the patterns that they open up, there's a ton to enjoy. For a lot of people that are, I guess, green steel mainstays from previous sets, it's not going to feel too much like your other green steel decks just because you don't have that discard package. It's a very fair, it's probably the most green purple feeling green steel certainly I've ever seen. But right now I just think you can't afford to not be playing strength if you're trying to maintain any sort of tempo advantage in a game. And then you're playing a game where you have Amber Steel in the format, you also can't really afford to not be playing Hook, Calhoun, those sorts of things. All these decks you'll just have non-games versus them sometimes. Access to cannons helps you even further. Another small note on Amber Steel, actually, one of the strong cases for the deck that improved the matchup is you always need something to clean up a Tiana as quickly as possible. Generally, you rely on strength to do that. With Purple Steel, for example, having access to Mother Knows Best on their exerted Tiana and immediately just clear their whole board when they've just quested behind a Tiana and are expecting to get away with you not being able to trade into much is such an absurd blowout that just, yeah, it's that extra consistency of having 8 3-cost songs that can blow a Tiana board open and open up all your trades versus 4. Yeah, it's just twice as likely to happen, which is fantastic. If you can guarantee it happening most games against them, your matchup transforms. So, yeah, I'm not too sure what more to say, because I guess we can talk a little bit about mulligans. It's very difficult to say the mulligans vary a lot matchup to matchup, but in general, on the play, you're looking for some nice patterns that enable you to shift Clarabelle. So whether you're talking about 3-cost Clarabelle or big Clarabelle, of course, they're more rewarding and tend to have greater impact on the play than on the draw, because you start sort of effectively one card down, you're moving first, and yeah, it can be massively swingy when you get these early fast Clarabelles off on the play. On the draw, you generally favour making sure you've got like a hook on Captain Hook on turn 1. You're much higher on Calhoun, and there's some interesting interplay here between these 1 and 2 drops, which is in the dark. You kind of always need, in my mind, you always need a hook or a Calhoun. So if you're planning to play a Clarabelle on turn 1, you want to prepare yourself to play a Calhoun on turn 2 to make sure you're effectively like developing enough strength in play that you are threatening, you're freezing the board, you're threatening good trades. So if you do just mulligan in the dark and play a turn 1 Clarabelle, and then your opponent daisies, the game isn't over, right? You actually need to have that Calhoun in your hand so you can develop your board accordingly. If you play Clarabelle into an Ursula on turn 2, you'll really feel like your board is just nothing. Like you can't achieve anything. Versus a Calhoun on the same turn, or flip it. If you play a hook on turn 1, you can get away with an Ursula on turn 2. Yeah, these like something needs to punch hard on one of these on this first or second turn. So you have to always figure out how you're going to develop a threatening enough board that your opponent isn't, if they are an aggressive deck, that they can't just immediately quest out turn 2, 3, and you get to freeze them until they form their Tiana turn. And when they do that, like I said before, you have the tools to disrupt them. You always have to think about how do you balance your ability to get your Clarabelle shift targets into play with making sure that you are keeping a nice threatening board going at the same time that's going to keep things nice and frozen until you pick your moment and open things up with a Mother Knows Best or a Strength, versus all those factors to consider at once, making sure that you are getting enough threats in play and not just playing a bunch of 1-strength dorks that couldn't challenge and also aren't effective questers. So that's kind of what I mean when I say these adaptive play patterns, where against some decks you certainly could get away with a turn 1 Clarabelle, turn 2 Ursula, but most decks will not allow you to do that. So when it comes to mulliganing blind, definitely make sure you've got something that you can punch with effectively. I don't mulligan much for Max Goofs. While they're kind of the flagship character of the deck, I don't find myself searching for them a whole lot. They're more things that you're like happy when they come along. So you need one song to start the engine of making sure you can buy things back with a Max when you draw them. Most games that's going to happen within a very reasonable time frame, and then when you do get the option, like when you top deck a Max, you're almost always happy. But if you start planning around, like for example, you don't want a Max as your 3-drop, you can't play a turn 2 vanilla on turn 3, it's a massive problem. Excuse me. So you don't try to set up like a turn 4 Max shift, which might be one of the things, if you look like what are the cool new cards in the deck, you see Shift Max Goof, you're thinking how can I start playing songs for free with that as quickly as possible. It's not really what you're going for. So always making sure it's a threatening 1 or 2 drop alongside a disruptive or shift target 1 or 2 drop. Whichever 3-drop fits your curve out best. So on the play, Clarabelle, fantastic, almost always going to net you a card. On the draw, Pete, fantastic, always going to make sure you get off the first strength. And against aggro, Lewis, always fantastic, incredible blowout for them when they're not playing Hook and Calhoun. And then, from there, it's just making the most of as you start to gas out, making sure you're making the most of all your Clarabelles, most of your docks, using Mother Knows Best and replayed Mother Knows Bests from both Maxes to ensure you're always getting maximum draws from your Clarabelle while maintaining this tempo advantage. Continue questing with your board that's nice and far ahead, and then you have Go-Go to close things out as well. So it's a pretty well-rounded strategy that's going to feel familiar and versatile to most players. I think, what else can we really say about mulligans? There are a reasonable number of uninkables in the deck at 14. Some matchups, cannons can be incredibly powerful and can just, for example, if you go on the draw against Amber Steel and they play a turn 1 Aurora, being able to cannon that can be massively disruptive to them. But it's a tough keep in the dark. Cannons is a really interesting card that you could talk a ton about because, it's like almost like the definition of swingy. It's when it's good, it's so unbelievably good. But costing 1, being uninkable, it's a tough thing to mulligan for. And like I say, it's obviously brilliant against aggro. It can be fantastic against green-blue even, because picking off small Clarabelles against purple-steel illusion decks, it's an incredibly efficient illusion tagger. So often it's an ideal card to have one of somewhere, but you're not mulliganing for it. I would say in general it's an on-the-play mulligan for your sort of Clarabelle line, assuming you have the right pieces within that line. So something like a 1-drop Clarabelle, Calhoun, 3-drop Clarabelle, a song, and a big Clarabelle plus 2 unknown cards is often about as fantastic of a hand as you could ever hope for in the dark. And then on the draw, much more focused on making sure you're establishing that strong board presence, using Pete to make sure you get the first strength off. Then you can start thinking about transitioning into some of those shift lines once you've been able to swing tempo back into your favour. So Hook, Calhoun, Pete, and a strength, and then that's your bread and butter. That's going to get you going. There's a conversation to be had around keeping docks. I know people really disagree about this. Some people are like, mulligan every dock, it's only good off the top of the deck. I kind of agree with that, but there are some times when you have a really aggressively costed hand, when you and you can think about keeping 1 dock. opportunity cost of that is reasonably low, especially if you're against one of these decks where it almost doesn't matter what the body in play does. You just want max bodies in play. Like Blurple, for example, once you go wide past a certain point, everything's a one quester. All of anything that kills something only kills one thing. So, like a 4-ink turn of 2 docks to draw 2 is not as much of a catastrophe as it may feel sometimes. So, I don't know. That's kind of that's like a gambling and mindset type discussion. But I don't hate keeping docks. I think you can keep one, especially on the play. Probably not too much more to say about that. If you wanted to make any changes to the deck, one thing I really, really like, that one small tweak you can make that I think improves the Blurple matchup at least a little bit, is the 3-cost Captain Hook underhanded, the 1/4 2-quester that whenever it's challenged, you draw a card. They don't have a lot of stuff that hits it effectively. If they want to clean it up early with just a single hit, they generally have to involve a quested Basil in the mix, at which point you get to pick off their Basil for free immediately after, ideally with a Calhoun. I think versus something like Lawrence, that Lawrence slot is it's certainly the 3-drop that's doing the least, but you do need something that can quest for 2. So your personal preference might be Prince Philip, Prince Philip, yeah, Prince Philip, or yeah, I would just say try out that Captain Hook underhanded. I think it's a massively underrated card that can snag you a ton of lore, threatens even more card draw. Yeah, a lot of decks actually have to give you 2 cards off that. It's a fair amount better than it looks, but at that point you have to start evaluating strength balance across your deck as well, where you really could get stuck into lines where it's like 1-drop, 2-drop, 3-drop, all of which have 1 strength. You have no challenge power whatsoever. You also open up walking into massive under the seas early in the game, which can be tough. So, as with all decks that are looking to curve out with steel cards, you do have to make sure that you don't build in such a way where you're incredibly soft to under the sea as well, which is doable. You can certainly get lured in by a lot of cards that incidentally suck into Under the Sea and mean that it's the same way we used to play around Sisu. You have to build these diverse boards where you have a mixture of strength across your characters, so that they're incentivized to do it because it gets something, but it doesn't get everything. And you maintain a sort of serviceable board afterwards. It doesn't all just go away at once. So yeah, some concluding thoughts. Really happy with the deck. I've had an absolute blast playing it. It was an incredible feeling to just like turn up at a tournament with it and no one having seen it, and then you win, and had such a stressful, hard-fought finals against Green Blue as well. Playing against Rob DeHaan from World Class Cards, and he's a lovely guy and fantastic competitor as always. I didn't think there was any way I would find a route to win that last game, and the feeling of sort of doing that there with a ton of friends there as well is incredible. So always a fan of trying to cook up something slightly different that you can take people by surprise with, and this was a really, really great option. I'm not sure what the surprise factor looks like now that I've shouted about the deck extensively and done everything in my power to make sure people know about it, but nonetheless, I think it's something you have to keep in mind if there are specific adjustments to the metagame. So if you do get into this, if things play out the way that I believe they would 2 weeks ago, where Amber Steel and Green Blue together constrain Blurple enough that you get Blurple down to something closer to a 20-25% metagame share, which I know is asking a lot right now, it might not go that far, then this is something you really have to look at, because this becomes the deck that beats that shifted metagame. Right now, really tough to advocate for across the board because of the Blurple matchup. Sure, you're bored of hearing me say that now. I just want to give things with like a pinch of salt. I really don't believe in this mindset of tournament winning deck, it's cracked, everyone pick this up and play it right now. Different decks are right for different people. Maybe you've enjoyed listening to my thoughts on this. Some of the things that I've said about the play patterns and some of the cards and their interactions makes you think, this sounds awesome. In that case, brilliant. Like, that's what I want. I want you to be excited by that, and if you like the sound of these things, try it out. But I don't go for the hyperbole that something like won a small event and is different, so definitely play it, metagame broken, that sort of thing. It's just there is an option that may align with how you think about the game, and especially may align with your local metagames going into set championships. So definitely one to think about. I'm very, very happy with it in general. And yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoy this. And on that thought, actually, whenever you there exists a culture within our game where whenever you brew up a deck and manage to win a little event with it, and people are excited to talk about it, the question everybody asks is, when is the Metafy? When will the Metafy be coming? The answer to that is never. I have absolutely no intentions to ever do anything like that. I think that for some people, obviously it's a fantastic option, and I love that my friends can make money and support their income by providing those kinds of services. It's not something I'm interested in doing because I don't believe in sort of selling my ideas and insight wholesale. I think that they will be valuable for some people and not for others, and I wouldn't be comfortable with someone paying for something that they didn't get much from. So anything that I do will always be ad hoc like this. If you really do feel like, maybe you're someone who's loved the podcast for ages and you just like listening to us, we don't really have any way to support that either. I'll put my Ko-Fi link in the description below in case you really have felt like you got a lot from listening to me talk for the last half an hour. But obviously there's absolutely no pressure to do anything like that. It just is there in case somebody wants to. Yeah, thank you so much to everyone for all the kind words and support and your continued amazing feedback on the podcast. It means the world to me how much people love to hear us talk about the game. It's done incredible things for my confidence to know that you actually get some value from it and some entertainment as well. That's like that mixture of insight and it's fun to listen to. It means everything. A year ago, I could not have turned my camera on and talked unedited for 37 minutes, however long this is running now, and just gone for it. It would not have been possible for me. It's only possible because of the people like you that have listened and the nice things you've said. Yeah, I'm eternally grateful for it. And I really hope that you've found this useful. It really was just me opening a Dreamborn image and yapping for half an hour about the deck. I hope some of the things I've said have been helpful to you. I probably should have approached it with more structure, but this will have, in my best hopes, it will have been an entertaining listen that gives you a little bit more insight into some of the thought behind the deck, and I guess crucially why you might want to consider how you can simultaneously in one hand say this has a bad on the draw game into Blurple, and also this deck is a potential choice and something to consider. How those two can coexist. Hopefully I've articulated that quite well. But yeah, still, thank you so much for coming along and watching. I can't promise massive regular updates on this channel. It exists mostly so I can comment on YouTube videos. But if you fancy subscribing, please do. You'll always see if I pop anything else like this up. I'm still working on Green Steel. I have some different iterations in testing. If any of them perform well, and especially, I'm not sure what I'm going to play in Bologna, but if I do decide to go with one of them, I'll do a little recap on that after. Maybe we can make these sort of solo yapping videos a bit of a more regular thing. But yeah, with that said, I'm going to wrap it up now. So thank you so much for listening. Like I say again a million times, I really hope it's been useful. I really hope you've at very least been entertained and seen something cool. I'm aware that Guy plus Dreamborn is a really boring format, but hopefully this kind of stream of consciousness chat, even if just as ASMR fodder, I hope it's something you enjoy. So thank you so much again, and yeah, I'll catch you next time. Thank you.